warm up. The 2-hour warm up. Those days are gone. All right.
Myles Kennedy, everybody, for those of you that don't know Myles, I first heard of Myles from his band Mayfield 4 back in the, I guess, late 90s.
Yeah.
And then you started with Alter Bridge, I think 2004, maybe? 3?
Yeah.
3?
Yeah,
Something like
this
that?
was officially January 2nd, 2004.
Yeah, so beginning of 2004. And you also have sung with Slash.
Yep, I've been working with Slash and the Conspirators for
a while.
A while, yeah. We did the first song together in September, I think, of 2009. And,
yeah.
So it's been a lot longer than I thought with both bands. To be honest with you, I'm surprised with how everything's turned out. Because I always assumed in the music industry, you'd have your 15 minutes, if that, and then you're gone. And so the fact that it's been 2 decades between Mayfield and I've been very, 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 very lucky. So I don't know what happened.
So Myles, you're coming through town here, you're touring.
Yeah.
And talk about that. You're out supporting a new record.
Yeah. Got a little record I made called The Ides of March, which is the second solo record, and I had some unexpected off time. I was supposed to be out touring and whatnot, so I decided to sit in my studio, which is not nearly as cool as yours, I have to say. This has been my dream scenario here. So
I'm such a massive fan of Myles. I mean, he's one of the greatest singers out there, and he's a phenomenal guitar player too.
No,
that's true.
No, the guitar. I mean, I do really love the guitar, but there are guys out there who have total command of the instrument. I mean, we probably follow some of the same guys on Instagram, and I'll see some of these guys post, and I'll be like, well, I'm glad I can sing.
Myles, well, that's the thing, is like, we all wish we were singers. At least I do. I wish I could sing. So you have really eclectic tastes in music, but one person that we share, we both are Jeff Buckley fans.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. For me, a lot of people point to Kurt Cobain as the '90s artist, mm-hmm. and I agree. He changed everything. All those bands did. I mean, that entire movement was incredible. I mean, we hadn't really seen anything like. I don't think we've seen anything quite like that.
Not since then.
No, that have had the ability to change pop culture. I mean, suddenly you had, the fashion industry promoting flannel and combat boots.
Right, in malls.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that was a big deal. That was really something else. So for me, as kind of it was an interesting time for me because I didn't really feel like I fit in that realm. That wasn't. I was into jazz and fusion, but I loved rock. I started as a rock kid, a little rocker. But I really did like the harmonic content in a lot of fusion and jazz music. And so I didn't know, and as a vocalist, I hadn't really found I didn't know that I was really going to be a singer at that point. I was still a guitar player. I worked at a music store, and I saved up. I sold a bunch of guitar strings from this company called Cayman. And mm-hmm. If you'd get. Long story short, you would get. If you sold enough strings, you could get like a free CD. So I was like, well, I heard this guy named Jeff Buckley. I heard this song. I thought this sounds kind of cool, so I ordered the CD. And I remember taking it home and just being absolutely. It was mesmerizing. I hadn't heard anything quite like it. It was magic, especially when you heard his version of Hallelujah.
Yeah. He's talking about the Grace album. Yeah. Jeff's only actual real release. So
many young aspiring writers and singers, and we all heard that record, and we're just like, what is that? And it's interesting with the influence he had after that.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be a Coldplay. There wouldn't be.
Muse. Yeah.
He was kind of the guidepost, and he was taken from us way too soon. I saw him perform once in Seattle. I think it was on the it would have been spring of '95. Now you saw him at.
I saw him in the East Village when I was living there. Yeah, it was. I saw him play at Chenet. I lived 500 feet from there. I mean, it's like literally right around the corner. He used to play there all the time. And I met him one night here in Atlanta, where I hung out with him and stuff. And just a brilliant guy. A lot of people don't know he went to GIT, that, right. And he was an excellent guitar player too. and into a lot of the guys like Alan Holdsworth. He was really into modern kind of shredding guitar and stuff, which is really cool. When you would never get that from his music, except for the fact that he was a really accurate guitar player. Like his when he played his parts and everything, he played them really well. But
you would think, the thing that was amazing is you would think those are altered tunings,
right?
And most of those were in standard, and he would the way his chord voicings were so brilliant. And he'd utilize the open strings in a way where it would have that drone. I feel like his guitar playing is kind of, I don't feel like he gets enough credit for that.
No, it's brilliant guitar playing.
It really is.
So I find it interesting, too, that you like people like Pat Metheny.
I do, yeah. So Pat Metheny, who I still haven't seen live just because it hasn't quite worked out. And I that needs to change. We should do that one day. I would love to go see Pat with you. That would be awesome. So my little brother, we both played trumpet, and he's my little brother, right? And he discovered jazz before I did, and I was still a little rocker listening to my hard rock and metal albums in the 80s. And one afternoon, I'm sitting there and I hear something coming from his bedroom, and I'm like, what is that? But he's like my little brother.
Right.
I'm not going to go knock on the door and open it up and go, what are you listening to, David?
Right.
And I remember just putting my ear to the door, and I think it was Third Wind off the Still Life Talking record.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And so finally, I think I had to kind of swallow my pride. Finally came out there. Okay, what were you listening to? And he's like, "That's Pat Metheny. That's Pat Metheny." So yeah, from that point forward. In fact, a lot of times when I would prepare for shows, I listen to Third Wind, the live version actually that was recorded. It's the Road. That's the the Road to You, or it came out in like '93, I think.
Yeah,
it was like I think it was recorded in during around that period, and so I love the live version of that because each of that break and that guitar solo.
Right.
But like, there's something about him and Lyle Mays as composers and the way they work together.
Yes,
yeah.
I know it's
the melody is just, aside from the shred, how proficient he is as a guitar player. For me, more than anything, it's his ability as a composer. Yeah.
Who are the people that you looked up to? And that you feel like there's like a direct lineage vocally from you? Jeff's
obviously one. Chris Whitley.
Yeah.
It's a really big one.
Another person who died really young.
Yeah.
And just a phenomenal singer and guitar player.
Yeah. Yeah, like a lot of people don't know who he is, and it's unfortunate because he was an artist. Those of us who would hear those records, Dirt Floor in particular.
Yeah.
You're just like, where did that come from? Genius. That would be one. Ella Fitzgerald. I mean, I think she has one of the most perfect instruments. Another one, as far as female vocalists go, would be Katie Lang.
Mm-hmm.
I think just the sound of her instrument is.
She's great.
Like, could you imagine being a producer and getting to record that instrument?
No.
Like, right?
Unfortunately, I couldn't.
I mean, it's got to be such a joy for a producer to have you.
Well, Myles, I can't imagine recording you as a producer. So that that's.
Oh, I don't know. You'd have to turn a lot of knobs, and
that's actually not true.
No, I mean I appreciate that, but as far as like the instrument, just the sonic, like the way that the balance of those instruments, like between her and Ella, Billie Holiday, there's just something about the quality of those voices that I hear and go, wow.
Myles, I started thinking about this. So Myles, other than Pat Metheny, Myles used to have the longest warm up. Pat would warm up for 4 hours. Myles warmed up his voice for like hour and a half, 2 hours. What was the longest you used to do? You don't do that anymore.
No,
right?
I don't.
I heard Myles warm up one time when he was at Tree Sound here in Atlanta when you were working on the first Alter Bridge record, and Myles was in this lounge for Studio A, and he's warming up. I'm walking down the hall and I hear him warming up through the door and everything. And I come back like an hour later and he's still warming up. Then I come back another hour later, he's still Still warming up. It was like, my God. This is unbelievable. It's like, how do you even have any energy to sing after this? But then you were kind of ready to sing, right?
Well, yeah, I guess. So at that point, to be honest with you, I was technically doing it wrong. It was like trying to force a square peg into a round hole. Mm-hmm. And so I had studied, I'd taken a few lessons up to that point with a vocal coach, amazing, named Ron Anderson, mm-hmm. who's to this day probably the most important part of the equation for me was having the opportunity to study with him a few times, because he kind of unlocked the keys to the kingdom. It was like he has this ability to take your voice and really free it up. But I'd only taken at that point like 10 lessons with him, and I hadn't perfected the technique yet. It took a long time to get that one figured out. And so you heard me when I was literally just trying to force a square peg into a round hole, because it was like, well, if I just keep, pushing through this, eventually it's going to open up. And the whole, it's kind of like with so many different things. As a guitar player, as an athlete, I'll tell you the same thing. It's about relaxing.
Yeah.
It's about having your placement just right. It's about your breath. It's all about the breath. And that was something, when you heard that cacophony in the warm-up room, that I hadn't quite fine-tuned just yet.
Okay, so Myles, you play guitar when you're singing, and tell me about how that affects your breathing when you actually have a guitar against you. Do you think about that? Does that actually affect how you sing? Do you practice singing or warm up with the guitar on?
I don't, but that's a good idea.
It does affect it though, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's
depending on how low you wear your guitar, if you wear it at a proper level, it doesn't affect
right.
it.
Well, what it'll do is if I'm pressing with my diaphragm, the guitar will kind of shoot out a little bit. But yeah, it really is crucial to have that support. So I always talk about I don't always talk about, this is something Ron brought up early on, it's basically the muscles that you pee with as a guy. It's like you kind of push those out as you're going across your break and into the upper register to use your head voice.
Yeah.
And so as long as that's all in place, and there's not I'm not using a lot of breath. It's a real subtle, subtle mechanism. So I think the hardest thing for me as a singer and a guitar player, especially now that I'm out touring as a three-piece,
yep.
You're naked. So any clam that you have, and trust me, it can be.
Myles doesn't make any mistakes.
No, it can be clam central some nights. And I joke with the fans, like, just have your notebook out and just how many times did he screw up that chord progression. But that's the hardest part. It's like rubbing your head or patting your head and rubbing your belly, because you have to remember the lyrics, chord progression. Then if you got to have a lead, you got to set things up there. Okay, relax. Make sure your picking technique is right, and it's a lot to think about. But I love that challenge. I love it because it's like every night before going out on stage, it's like, well, here you go. Strap yourself in.
Okay, so Myles, how high? Like, what's the highest note now you would sing in a set? Typically,
it's not crazy high. I've learned over the years that the long high notes.
Yeah.
If I want to maintain pitch in the lower register.
Yeah. And
control, if I do a lot of that, even if I'm using the right technique, it'll just kind of throw everything out of line. And when you're younger,
I've heard you sing unbelievably high notes that they're just effortless. They seem to be. This is a long time ago.
A long time ago.
But but there's a technique for doing that, though, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you shouldn't. What's really cool about the technique? It's an old opera technique. It's called Bel Canto. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that they developed this like 300 years ago, from what I've been told. So whoever came up with stumbled onto it, because it's a lot. It's a lot of like, okay, in your lower register, your vowels do a certain thing. So A's go to A, And as you go higher, that vowel changes, and then you kind of like shoot it out the back of your head, and it's really complex. And you're thinking about all of this. So that for the first few years of learning the technique, it was just run the scales and arpeggios over and over every night before you go on stage. And it's like anything. It's repetition, and it's I heard this great phrase recently. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Oh yeah. That's an old saying. That's a true saying too.
Absolutely. If you just keep doing it over and over, and you do it right, you train your brain, eventually you don't think about it anymore. And that's what's fascinating. Now it's actually really beautiful. If I'm feeling good and rested, and I'm warmed up, as opposed to what I just attempted here, it's open. Everything's open, and it's like riding a wave, and it's total freedom, and it's very Zen-like. I think it's probably like when you listen to Coltrane. Trust me, I'm not putting anything that I do in that realm. But it's that same sort of thing where an improviser, you can tell when they're really in the zone.
Yeah.
And it's all just happening, and they're very present. And it's the same thing vocally with you. If you reach that point, or you could just be a natural singer. I guess I've had to learn some tricks.
Myles, you're a natural singer. Come on.
Well, there are people who are natural. I had a moderate amount of natural ability that through working with someone
Myles
like Ron.
has a ridiculous amount of natural ability.
No. I mean, I could carry tune and I could hear pitch, but it was something that I really worked on. Having the opportunity to study with someone who understood the mechanics of the human voice, and from a physiological level. And it's funny, we'd sit there and he'd go, now this part of your, and I won't even try and repeat it because he's a master, right? And but it was really cool to learn all of that. And he told me this is what's really great about it, is that he assured me, and this was in 1997 when I took my first lesson with him, and he said, if you do this technique, as you get older, you'll still have an instrument.
You won't lose your range.
You won't lose your range.
And it's true.
Well,
I mean, you sound as good as you did 20 some odd years ago when I first heard you.
It's different now. I mean, I gunned it a lot more then, so there's a lot more rasp.
Yeah.
There was a lot more. It was kind of like putting the overdrive pedal on, which has a certain quality. But I think that just through the amount that I've toured over the years, and I realized that the more that I did that, it would fatigue the vocal cords. And I was like, I'm more interested in trying to maintain pitch and maintain longevity.
Let me ask you this. Did you ever have gigs where you would oversing like early on and then you'd lose your falsetto for a bit or something? Or if you tried to do a falsetto note, that nothing would come out? If you do too much full voice singing and hard singing, that it affects your things like your falsetto and your control?
Control, definitely.
Yeah.
Falsetto, not as much.
Okay.
The falsetto, and I think the falsetto came about because for years I was in top 40/R&B bands, and they would give me the female high vocal part that I have to sing in my falsetto. Like I was singing falsetto to whatever the track, the hit of the day was, and so I had to learn to kind of survive with that. But the control thing, if you're gunning it, and you're singing in your chest voice above, a G.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, a song later, like, why is it all warbly and weird, and why can't I hold pitch in a register normally where there's no problem? And so that's what I had to learn, was that control. And it really is all about the control and doing it over and over and over. And that was one of the things that not just practice, but because I've been lucky enough to tour with all these bands, and like in 2019 I was on the road or in the studio for 300 days that year, so you're constantly having the opportunity to practice in kind of in the when you're on stage, it's a different thing. You got the adrenaline. It's a much different animal. It's a totally different process. So you do that for a decade or two, and it starts to become more natural. The first record for a major that I did with the Mayfield 4, Jerry Harrison was the producer.
Okay.
The Talking Heads.
Yeah.
Awesome dude.
Yeah.
But he kind of had his work cut out for him because I back then I had I had a sinus issue for years. In fact, if I could go back and record pretty much anything before 2015, before I got it fixed, I just had kind of like a constant sinus infection, and it was really problematic. So we were in the studio, and there was all this construction going on. So I had allergies, and we ended up having to leave. We were in Seattle at the studio, and we ended up having to finish the vocals down in San Francisco in a studio that wasn't being worked on. But yeah, I mean, trust me, it was not an easy task to make that first Mayfield 4 record, because you're dealing with the element. And I didn't know, there's so many things I didn't understand as a young singer. I didn't understand how my instrument worked. I should have said, oh, I'm allergic to this room. As singers, I think initially when you start singing, I should just be able to talk. It should just happen whenever it happens. And that's not the case. It's like there are a lot of variables. You want humidity's good. Rest is paramount. You're not talking a lot. I love to talk. I love to converse, and I'm notorious on the road for, not doing press, because it kind of takes the edge off. Yeah. And then pitch gets harder. During the show. But I feel really, and I always apologize when I finally get to do press. I'm like, we tried to get an interview during the tour, but you couldn't do it because you're singing, and I feel really bad. Like, I don't want to be like this standoff guy. Like, I love this. I love communicating, especially talk about music. But then I'm standing on stage in front of a bunch of people. I'm like, why can't I hit that note? Oh yeah.
When I was talking to Brian May about Freddie Mercury, he told me that Freddie on the first Queen record was not a good singer. I was really disappointed. Freddie was disappointed in his singing, and he worked really hard to become a great singer. And I always thought that was interesting, that it doesn't matter who it is. You have to... Most people that are that become these, great singers historically were people that learned to sing over recording themselves and hearing it back, maybe getting a teacher. There's so many, you have to always have feedback on your singing, especially by recording yourself. That's like a big thing, because people don't realize what their pitch is like unless they go and listen back to it. They don't develop strategies for how to track, like getting a headphone mix, things like that. These are all really incredibly important things, and obviously important for live performance. I'm going to ask you about like in-ears and things like that. We had talked about this before about in-ears. You use in-ears all the time now, right?
Can't live without them.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big thing for you to go to in-ears, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I started using in-ears early on, like in the late 90s, but the technology hadn't advanced to where it is now. They were like
it's a massively big difference now with in-ears, right? Total game changer for singers. Absolutely. Having a good in-ear mix.
Yeah,
saves people's voices. Really does.
When I see footage from, say, the 70s, before they even had monitors, these wedges.
Yeah,
I have no idea how they were able to survive, especially with some of these guys using not just 100-watt heads, but like Marshall Majors of all things.
Oh my God, 200-watt heads, yeah.
So I really feel...
how did they even do it?
I don't know.
I mean, the Beatles sang in tune at Shea Stadium, and they couldn't even hear themselves, and they still were singing in tune.
I couldn't. I
never figured that out.
I know, it's crazy, but yeah, with so I used the JH Audio monitors, Jerry Harvey's, and they're great. I think they're called the JH13s, and it's a very flat. It's really nice, but in the top end, for me, it's about that top end, hearing that mask,
right?
So that it helps me ride that wave.
Do you feel like you're disconnected? I mean, how much of Mark do you have in? How much of Flip do you have? Like, what's your mix usually like? Is it you?
A lot of vocals.
You mainly you, right?
A lot of vocals. I'll pan my guitar to the right.
Yeah.
Pan Mark to the left.
Yep.
Bass kind of in the middle. Drums kind of in the middle. And the vocals.
Do you need much drums in there or not?
I like to hear the hi-hats.
Yeah.
Just to keep time.
Yeah.
Because one thing I don't like is to be ahead as a singer. I like to sit in the pocket, and Flip's got a great pocket.
Do you ever feel disconnected from the audience though with it or no?
Yeah, that can be.
That's the thing is the feedback feedback in that the response from the audience. That's the one drawback of in-ear monitors is that
Yeah, it can cut you off.
Yeah.
You can put like 2 little condensers.
And actually bring in the room sound like that.
But then you get a lot of excess.
You get all the cymbal hash and things like that you don't want to have in there.
But the nice thing, when you can't hear the crowd, is if that dude is screaming, "You suck." You have no idea.
You don't have
and
to.
You're just like, I'm having a great time. So, yeah, I mean, it is. It definitely is. At first, it's a little bit weird, and that's why a lot of artists push, especially guitar players.
Yeah.
And it screws with your guitar playing too, though, like because it's right there going into your ears.
Is there any delay if you use any type of digital plugins or anything? Do they have any type of latency that you notice or no?
I don't notice any latency. No,
I wondered about that. If you're going through digital, if you have a digital monitor console, if there's any type of any latency or anything like that.
They've got it down to a science now. Yeah, no, that would
be pretty bad.
I couldn't deal with that.
Yeah.
That would be brutal.
You did My Funny Valentine with Chris Cornell for his wife's 40th birthday or so, and tell me about that experience, about tuning up your guitar.
Well, it was an amazing experience, but I had become. It highlighted how I've become so like so many of us. I've become to rely on tuners for tuning my guitar, and I was going to comp on the song as we sang it, and I remember I had my guitar, and we were in the basement getting ready to practice, and I was trying to tune it up, but I was nervous. So I was sitting next to one of the greatest singers of all time, and he finally was just like, "Hey, let me, I'll do it." I was crestfallen. The song that I'm going to play is off the new record. It's called 1,000 Words. And it was actually inspired by a photograph that someone sent my wife. Her father just passed away. And it's just this beautiful picture of her mother just standing over his grave, and it just spoke, just so much about our short time on this planet, and our mortality, and how precious life is. 1,000 Words. In times like these, we must live and learn. Where will I go when I can't right the wrongs? Where will I turn to when I don't belong? The things I took for granted way too long. must live and learn. The image in my mind, a cause for reason, mostly day and night. Impermanence refined, just like the seasons, we fade away in time. Will they say that a picture's worth 1,000 words? In the ache of an image I have seen the worst. Will they say that a picture's worth 1,000 words? In the ache of an image I have seen the worst. Like a million screams for mercy that can't be unheard. In times like these, we must live and so I won't take for granted or speak out of turn. 'Cause in times like these, we must live and learn. In times like these, we must live and learn. In times like these, we must live and learn.
Awesome.
Thank you, brother.
Myles, thank you so much for stopping by. It's been so great to meet you in person. Follow Myles. I'll have all the links in the description for his tour dates, and go out and see him when he comes to your town. Thanks, man.
Thank you. It's been an absolute honor. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. That's all for now. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment. Check out my new Quick Lessons Pro guitar course that just came out. Also, the Beato book, if you want to learn about music theory, that's how you do it. And check out my Beato ear training course at beatoeartraining.com. And don't forget, if you want to support the channel even more, think about becoming a member of the Beato Club. Thanks so much for watching.